When I first heard the term desertification, I had a completely different image in my mind. I had an idea of cookies and cakes and pies, and I don't know, I kind of wondered, it's like, is it some sort of government-sanctioned program that's going to bring strawberry shortcake to the masses? I had no idea. Well, desertification is not that, fortunately. Simply put, by ecologist Alan Savory, desertification is a fancy word for land that is turning to desert. And this only happens when we create too much bare ground. I soon found out that this is a big problem for our planet. And I believe that by sharing with you what I've learned and becoming aware of the causes, effects, and victims of desertification, we'll have a chance of reversing the damage that it has caused. We only have one planet. This is it. We have a choice to make now as to what we're going to leave behind for future generations. I do only have a limited amount of time, so I can only touch upon the causes and effects of desertification briefly. But this will include concepts in geography, ecology, and anthropology. More specifically, desertification's relationship with climate change, water issues, and famine. Lastly, I will share with you some of the ways that people are fighting desertification here on the planet. The direct cause of desertification is the removal of vegetation from the soil. This is done in the name of production of food and fibers from the soil for humans, by humans. And according to the US Census Bureau, the world population is now over 7 billion people. Now please consider that only 30% of our planet is land, and the world's population is projected to be almost 10 billion in 30 years. This whole time we've been farming, cultivating, and shaping the earth pretty much since the dawn of civilization. And things have changed so much in the last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. People have moved from rural agrarian societies, and they've settled in cities and factories where the jobs and the factories were. And along with it, our wild herd and grazing activity has changed from nomadic and mobile to sedentary. Along with it, the agricultural models have changed so much. The practices are no longer based on small-scale farms that produce a variety of things. Rather, we have large-scale factory farms that specialize in one thing. We are left with too much livestock grazing on too concentrated of a land. And with the growing needs of the population, we leave the ground exposed, unprotected, and the soils exposed and unprotected. Whether it's through logging for lumber or fuel wood, we strip the land even further. And this unprotected earth loses topsoil in the wind, erosion, and flash flooding. And this exposed ground also bakes in the sun and turns to hard pan. Through the rapid growth of the world's population, the rising demand for resources, and the sprawl of our agricultural practices, we have affected all living things. And some of these effects of desertification, such as climate change, water issues, and famine, are wide-spanning and devastating. Let us briefly look at some of the damaging results of desertification. If you clear out 1 square yard of soil and you make it bare, it will be much cooler in the morning and much hotter in the midday. But you take that same plot of soil or ground and you cover it with some sort of organic matter, whether it, like mulch or leaves, foliage, not unlike a garden, we'll be insulating it. The temperature is going to remain a lot more consistent. But what we're doing when we're doing in that small area of land is we're controlling the microclimate. And we're now actually controlling the macroclimate when we start considering the fact that half the world's forests are now gone, and a third of the Earth's surface is already barren and exposed. It's not unlike an uncovered garden that is cool in the morning and hot at midday, but this is just happening on a global level. With this lack of vegetation and no root systems in the soil, we're also devastating our water supply. The water and the carbon evaporates quickly off of the barren land, and on top of it, the salinity of the soil is rendered useless for future crops. If there's no vegetation and you add heavy rain on top of that, you now have flooding. And the soil erodes even more, and the people that are living in those flooded areas are displaced and or killed. The rapidly growing population has outstripped any gains that we've had in food supply, and it produced devastating famines throughout the planet. And the places that are suffering the worst, they don't import food. They rely on the food they harvest to eat. And so you see displaced peoples and wildlife concentrated in areas that are already strained for resources. And desertification makes it impossible for the soil to provide food on that large of a scale. You have too many people on too little land, it strains the delicate and few resources that we have there. Whether it's issues like climate shifts, water management, and famine, they're intimidating to grapple with. However, there is hope with some of the methods that are being developed and practiced today. Through afforestation and tree planting programs, countries like China, India, Vietnam, and US have added more than 7 million hectares of new forest annually. And even Brazil and Indonesia, who had the highest rate of deforestation in the 1990s, they are implementing afforestation programs now. There's other countries, they're practicing more responsible water management. Israel has the most impressive water conservation practice in the world. 50% of their irrigated water comes from wastewater that has been recycled. The next closest is Spain at only 20%. Another movement is the holistic management of livestock and grazing herds. We need to understand what niche that herds fit into. The reason that herds exist is by themselves, an animal by itself is susceptible to predators. In herds, they're protected. And they would migrate because they would be defecating, urinating, and tamping down the ground where they happen to be feeding. Well, this is proven to be, this is good for the soil. The tamping down of the vegetation insulates the soil. The tamping down of existing vegetation embeds the root systems and it allows new growth to compete. And the defecation, urination, and salivation add nutrients to the soil when it's left behind. I know I've covered quite a bit of ground here. This is a good example, by the way. This is the same site in 2006. This is the site in 2006. This is the same site in 2008. This is just from controlled migration, just in 2 years. I know I've covered quite a bit of ground here in the last 7 minutes, and I hope you know now that desertification has many facets and the seeds of its destructive effects were planted when humans took dominion over the land and the livestock on a grand level. And desertification is directly responsible for climate change, water issues, and famine. Thankfully, there are people that have dedicated their lives to understanding and reversing these tragedies. How do we utilize the land for development and agriculture? How do we face the problems of famine or climate change? How do we deal with the rising world population? These are complex questions. However, understanding that desertification is largely a product of our choices will remind us that we have control of where we go from here. Thank you.
7 minutes and 30 seconds because I started.